The morning of my 32nd birthday, I woke up to 0 messages, not one text, not one missed call, not a single notification from anyone in my family. My phone was completely silent. I lay there in bed staring at the ceiling for a long time, telling myself maybe they were planning something. Maybe there was a surprise coming. Maybe they forgot the time zone difference. I told myself a lot of things that morning. I was good at that. I had been making excuses for my family for so long that it had become its own kind of skill. Then, 4 days later, my mother called. Not to apologize, not to say she had been thinking of me. She called because my brother Marcus needed $32,000 to cover the final deposit on a private yacht charter for his birthday celebration. He was turning 30. It was going to be a big event. The family wanted it to be perfect. And since Luna had a good job and no children and was doing well, the family thought it made sense for Luna to be the one to contribute the most. That was almost word for word what my mother said to me, not asked, announced, like it had already been decided. I had not received a birthday card from my family in 11 years, but they needed $32,000 from me by Friday. By the time this story ends, you are going to understand exactly why I did what I did. And you are going to understand why a single dollar was the most powerful thing I had ever sent anyone in my life. Before I take you all the way through this, I want to ask you something real. Think about the people in your life who only call when they need something. Think about how many times you answered anyway. Think about how many times you told yourself that family is family, and love means giving even when it hurts. I need you to stay with me through this whole story because somewhere in the middle, I think you are going to recognize something. And I want to know in the comments what you would have done differently than me, and what you think you would have done the same. My name is Luna. I am 32 years old. I have a good job, a small apartment I own outright, and a savings account I built entirely by myself. I have no cosigner on my mortgage. I have no family money behind me. Everything I have, I earned through 11 years of working 2 jobs, making sacrifices, and saying no to things I wanted so I could build something stable and real. I tell you this not to brag. I tell you this because my family spent over a decade watching me build this life and somehow came to believe that what I built was partly theirs. They never said it out loud, not exactly. But it showed in the way they talked to me. It showed in what they asked for. It showed in what they never gave back. And it showed, more than anything else, in what they forgot to do every single year on the day I was born. My birthday is March 14th. I have known that date my entire life for obvious reasons. My mother was present at the moment it happened. My father was in the waiting room. My older brother Marcus was 5 years old and apparently told the nurses his baby sister was going to be a superhero. I know this story because my mother used to tell it when I was small. She used to tell it like it was precious, like I was precious. At some point, that feeling stopped being something she acted on, and it just became a story she had told so many times she forgot why it used to matter. The first year my birthday passed without acknowledgement, I was 21. I told myself everyone was busy. My parents had just moved to a new city. Marcus was in college and constantly overwhelmed. I called them on my birthday instead of waiting, and my mother said, "Oh, sweetheart, has it already been a year? Time flies so fast." She laughed a little and then asked me how school was going. That was the whole conversation. 7 minutes. Then she said she had to start dinner. I cried that night. I told myself it would not happen again. It happened every year after that, for 11 years in a row. I want you to understand what that is like. Not the pain of one forgotten birthday. The pattern. The slow erosion of expecting anything, and then the quiet grief that settles in when you stop expecting and realize you never should have had to lower yourself to that in the first place. Every year I would wake up on March 14th with some small piece of hope still alive in me. And every year my phone would be quiet. And every year I would be the one to call, or sometimes I would not call, and either way nothing came. There were years when I received a message 3 days late. Once it was a full week. My mother texted me, "Belated birthday, sweetheart," with a flower emoji, and then immediately followed up asking if I had heard from my cousin about Thanksgiving plans. My father sometimes sent a brief voice message that sounded like he recorded it in a parking garage while thinking about something else. Marcus rarely acknowledged it at all. One year he sent a meme. That was it, a meme. not even one with the word birthday in it. Meanwhile, I want to tell you what March looked like in my family for Marcus. Marcus was born on March 29th, 15 days after me. For as long as I can remember, the last 2 weeks of March belonged to him. There was always a dinner, always a cake, always a group chat full of loving messages starting at midnight. My mother would bake his favorite lemon cake from scratch. My father would call Marcus first thing in the morning, and the call would last over an hour. My aunts would send gifts. My cousins would organize a group outing. One year they rented a cabin for the weekend. One year they threw him a surprise party at a restaurant and flew in his college roommate from out of state. I was at that party. I helped plan it. I paid for the flight. My birthday was 15 days before all of that. It happened in a family silence so complete that sometimes I wondered if they had simply reorganized their internal calendars and left me out of the year entirely. I kept showing up. I kept contributing to Marcus's celebrations. I kept being the one who remembered everyone's special occasions with cards and gifts and genuine effort. I thought for a long time that was just who I was, the one who gave, the one who remembered, the one who held the family together through consistent love even when that love was not coming back to me. I did not realize until much later that I was not holding the family together. I was funding a system that did not include me. I was pouring into a well that had a false bottom. And every time I poured more in, the people around me took it as confirmation that I did not need anything poured back. There was a conversation I had with my mother about 3 years before everything came to a head. I had finally said something. I had gone off the phone after another silent birthday, and something inside me refused to stay quiet the way it always did. I called her back. I said, "Mom, today was my birthday." She said she knew. I said, "You didn't call." She paused for a moment and then said, "Luna, you know I love you. You don't need me to call you like a child." I asked her what that meant. She said that I was independent, that I had my own life, that Marcus needed more from the family because he was still figuring things out. She said I should take it as a compliment that they didn't feel the need to baby me. I want you to sit with that for a moment. My mother told me that being forgotten was a compliment, that my independence meant I did not deserve acknowledgement. That because I had built a stable life, the emotional gestures of love that every human being deserves no longer applied to me. I did not argue. I said okay. I said I understood. I thanked her for explaining it, and I got off the phone and I sat very still in my apartment for a long time. That conversation became a hinge point in my memory, because after that, I began to see things differently. Not all at once. Slowly. The way your eyes adjust when the lights in a room get dimmer, degree by degree, so gradually you don't notice until you're sitting in the dark and wondering when that happened. I started keeping notes. Not intentionally at first. I am someone who journals, and my journals from those years are full of small observations. A dinner where Marcus announced a business idea and the whole table leaned in with interest, while I had shared news about my promotion the week before, and the conversation had moved on within 30 seconds. A Christmas where every gift was carefully chosen for Marcus and mine were clearly last minute. A phone call where my mother mentioned, casually, that she and my father had transferred some money to Marcus to help him with rent, and then in the same breath asked if I could help cover a family trip because Marcus couldn't afford to contribute. Every time I pointed out an imbalance, I was told I was being sensitive. Every time I expressed hurt, I was told I was being dramatic. Every time I asked for equity, I was told that family doesn't keep score. But the family kept score. The score just wasn't written in a way that included me on the winning side. I want to tell you about the money, because this story is partly about love and partly about a family that confused the two things in a way that cost me more than I ever calculated. Over the 11 years between when I turned 21 and when I turned 32, I gave my family a significant amount of money. Some of it was direct. When Marcus's first business failed, I covered 6 months of his rent without being asked twice. When my parents needed a new roof, I paid half of it. When my father had a health scare and needed a procedure not covered by insurance, I put in $4,000 without hesitation. When Marcus went through his divorce, I covered his attorney fees up front and he said he would pay me back. He has never paid me back a single cent. The total of what I gave over those 11 years, not counting the emotional labor, not counting the trips I organized and the parties I funded, and the flights I booked for other people's celebrations, was somewhere above $70,000. I know this because I went back through my records. I have always been careful with money. I saved every receipt, every Venmo confirmation, every bank transfer notification. I had a folder on my computer called Family that I had added to without much thought, and when I finally opened it and added everything up, I sat with that number for a very long time. $70,000, over 11 years, from a woman whose birthday they forgot every single year. Now I want to tell you about the call. It was March 18th, 4 days after my 32nd birthday had come and gone in silence. I had spent my birthday working a half day, going to a movie alone, and eating dinner at a sushi restaurant where I ordered everything I wanted and read a book at the table. It was actually a good day. I had long since learned to make my own birthday what I needed it to be, but the absence still sat with me, the way it always did, quiet and heavy underneath the good parts of the day. My phone rang at 11:47 in the morning on March 18th. It was my mother. I answered because I always answered. She asked how I was doing. She said she had been meaning to call. She said things had been so busy. I waited for some acknowledgement of the date that had just passed. It did not come. Instead, she moved smoothly into the reason for the call. She said that Marcus's 30th birthday was coming up at the end of the month, and the family wanted to do something really special. She said they had found a private yacht company that did full weekend charters, and it was perfect for the occasion. She said the whole family was contributing, but the final deposit was the largest single payment, and she thought it made the most sense for Luna to cover it, since Luna was in the best financial position. The amount was $32,000. She said it the way someone says pass the salt, like the number was a small thing, like it was a practical matter, not an extraordinary demand. She said the deposit was due by Friday and that Marcus would be so touched if the family made this happen for him. I want to tell you exactly what I felt in that moment because it is important. I did not feel a hot rush of anger. I felt something quieter and colder than anger. I felt a kind of clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when a thing you have suspected for a very long time suddenly becomes undeniable. Like when you've been smelling smoke for months and finally turn around and see the fire you already knew was there. I asked my mother what she had given me for my birthday. There was a pause. She said, "What?" I said, "My birthday was March 14th, 4 days ago. I'm wondering what you gave me." Another pause. She said something about how she had been meaning to reach out and things had just gotten hectic. She said she was sorry about that. She said she would make it up to me. Then she moved back to the yacht deposit. She said she was asking me nicely and that the family really needed this to come together. I said, "I'll think about it." She said, "Luna, the deposit is due Friday." I said, "I heard you. I said I'll think about it." I got off the phone. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold in front of me. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not text anyone. I just sat there with that number in my head and 11 years of receipts and journal entries arranged behind my eyes like a very organized archive of every time I had been used by the people who were supposed to love me. And I started to make a plan. The first thing I did was open my laptop and pull up my family folder. I went through every transfer, every payment, every receipt, every record I had. I created a new document and I organized the data carefully. Dates, amounts, purposes, who received the money, whether it was ever repaid. When I was done, the document was 4 pages long and the total at the bottom was $72,430. Then I did something I had not done in a long time. I called my best friend Deanne. Deanne and I have been friends since college. She is sharp, she is loyal, and she is the kind of person who tells you the truth without making you feel like you are being punished for asking. I told her everything. Not a summary, the full account. The birthdays, the parties, the money, the phone call that morning. The yacht. The $32,000 deposit due Friday. I told her about the number I had added up. Diane was quiet for a while after I finished. Then she said, "Luna, you have been paying for a family that has not been treating you like family, and now they want more." I said, "I know." She said, What are you going to do? I told her I was still working on it, but that I already had one idea, and I wanted to sit with it for a day before I decided if I was going to do it. She asked what the idea was. I told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, not a mean laugh, a deep, warm, you finally see it laugh. She said, "Do it. Luna, please do it." I told her I would call her back. The next day, I began doing something I had never done before with my family. I began gathering evidence with intention. I went back through my phone and pulled up every group chat I had ever been part of. I took screenshots. The birthday group chat for Marcus's 28th, 29th, and upcoming 30th were full and enthusiastic. My birthday in those same years was represented by nothing. A complete void in the family group chat. Not one message on March 14th in any of those years. I had been part of those group chats. I had not been mentioned. I also found something I had not expected to find. In the family group chat from Marcus's 29th birthday, my mother had sent a message that said, and I am reading this exactly as she wrote it, "This family knows how to celebrate our babies. Marcus, you are so loved. Never forget it." The message had 17 heart reactions from various family members. It was sent on March 29th of that year. My birthday had been 15 days before. No one had posted a single thing. Then I found something that changed the shape of the story. I was scrolling through an older email thread, one that had started years ago about a family property. My maternal grandmother had owned a small house outside the city. When she passed, the house was supposed to be distributed among her grandchildren. I had always been told the estate was still being settled, that there were complications with the title, and that it would get sorted eventually. This had been going on for 7 years. Inside that old email thread, buried under dozens of replies, I found a message from my uncle addressed to my mother and 2 of my aunts. The message was dated almost 3 years ago. It referenced a document I had never seen and a meeting I had never been invited to. The message said that the property transfer had been finalized and that the decision had been made to allocate the asset to Marcus given his financial situation. It said that Luna had been considered, but that given her financial independence, the family felt the asset would be better placed with Marcus. I had never been told this, not once. No one had called me, no one had emailed me. No one had said, "Luna, we talked about grandmother's house and we made a decision." They had distributed the property without telling me, and they had used my own stability as the justification for cutting me out. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it something simple. I named it Truth. I moved the screenshot of that email into it. I kept going. Over the next 48 hours, I worked methodically. I pulled bank records. I matched them to the family requests I could document. I went through old texts. I organized the evidence into clean categories. Financial requests made of Luna, financial contributions made by Luna, amounts never repaid, family assets distributed without Luna's knowledge, documented birthdays ignored, documented birthdays of Marcus celebrated with Luna's involvement or funding. At the end of 48 hours, I had a very clear picture. And the picture did not look like a family that occasionally got busy and forgot. It looked like a family where one member had been systematically treated as a financial resource rather than a person, where that member's independence had been used as a reason to deny her both emotional recognition and equitable treatment, where the same family that had forgotten her every year for over a decade now expected her to produce $32,000 by Friday for her brother's party. I called Diane again on Thursday night. I told her the picture had gotten bigger. I told her about the property. She said, "Luna, I need you to also call a lawyer." I had already been thinking about that. The property issue was not something I was going to let go. Not anymore. If there was documentation showing that a family asset had been transferred without proper process and without notifying all interested parties, that was worth understanding from a legal standpoint. I am not someone who files lawsuits casually. But I am also not someone who lets $72,000 of generosity and a piece of inherited property disappear without asking a single question. I contacted an estate attorney that same Thursday night via email. I attached the email thread I had found and asked for a preliminary consultation. I was not making any moves yet. I was just opening a door. But opening that door made me feel steadier than I had felt in a very long time. Friday came. My mother called at 9 a.m. She asked if I had thought about the deposit. She sounded relaxed, confident. She sounded the way people sound when they fully expect to hear yes. I said, "Mom, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm going to make a contribution." She said, "Oh, good. Should I send you the payment info?" I said, "I'll send it directly to Marcus. I want it to be personal." She said that was so thoughtful. She said Marcus would love that. She said, "Luna, you really are the best." I said, "I love my brother." I got off the phone. I opened my Venmo app. I found Marcus's account. I typed in the amount. $1. In the note field, I wrote, "Happy early birthday, Marcus. This is my contribution. Adjust the yacht plans accordingly." I hit send. Then I opened the family group chat. And for the first time in years, I was the one posting on the birthday topic. I wrote a message to the group. It was calm. It was polite. It was 5 sentences long. I said that I hoped everyone had a wonderful celebration planned for Marcus. I said I had just sent my contribution directly to him. I said that going forward, I wanted the family to know that I would no longer be in a position to make large financial contributions to family events. I said I was recalibrating my budget to focus on my own priorities. I said I wished everyone well and that I loved them. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and went to make breakfast. Within 4 minutes, the group chat was on fire. I did not look at it right away. I ate my breakfast. I had scrambled eggs with spinach and a piece of toast with good butter, and I drank my coffee while it was still hot. I looked out the window at my street. It was a gray morning, but the kind of gray that feels clean rather than heavy. I sat with my coffee for 20 minutes before I picked up my phone. There were 47 messages in the group chat. My mother had written 3 times. The first message said, "Luna, what does this mean?" The second said, "This is not funny." The third said, "Call me right now." Marcus had written twice. The first message said, "Is this a joke?" The second said, "Luna, what is wrong with you? The deposit is due today." My father had written once. He said, "Luna, call your mother." 3 of my aunts had weighed in. 2 of them were on Marcus's side immediately, asking what was going on with me, suggesting I was being dramatic, and wondering if something had happened to make me act this way. The third aunt, my Aunt Vera, had not written anything in the chat, but she had sent me a private message that said, "Good for you." I saved that message. I saved it in my truth folder. I did not call my mother. I did not call Marcus. I did not call my father. I put the phone down again and went about my day. My mother called 4 times. My father called twice. Marcus called once and then sent a text that said, "This is really low, Luna. We're family." I did not respond to any of them. At 2:15 that afternoon, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered it. It was my uncle, the one who had been involved in the property email thread. He said he was calling on behalf of the family to try to understand what was going on with me. He said he had heard I was refusing to contribute to Marcus's birthday, and that I had sent $1 as some kind of statement, and that the family was upset and confused. I said, "I'm glad you called." He paused. He said, "You are?" I said, "Yes, because I actually wanted to talk to you about grandmother's house." The pause that followed was one of the longest pauses I have ever experienced in a phone conversation. It lasted long enough that I checked to make sure the call was still connected. Then my uncle said, very carefully, "What about it?" I said, "I found the email. The one from about 3 years ago where the family decided to transfer the property to Marcus. The one where no one told me a decision had been made." He said, "Luna, that was a complicated situation." I said, "I understand that. I've actually spoken with an estate attorney who says it might be more complicated than you realize. I've scheduled a formal consultation for next week. I just wanted to let you know, since you're the one who called to ask what's going on with me." Another long pause. Then he said he would have to call me back. He hung up before I could say anything else. I sat with the stillness that followed that call. It was a different stillness than the one I had been carrying for 11 years. That old stillness was the stillness of someone who had been swallowing hurt for so long they no longer remembered what it felt like to let it out. This new stillness was the stillness of someone who had finally turned around to look at the fire directly and decided they were not going to keep pretending it wasn't there. The calls and messages kept coming through the day and into the weekend. My mother shifted from angry to tearful. She called on Saturday and said she was hurt. She said she didn't understand why I was doing this to the family. She said she had always tried her best. She said that she knew she wasn't perfect, but that she loved me, and she couldn't understand why I was choosing Marcus's birthday as the moment to blow everything up. I let her talk for a long time. Then I said very gently, "Mom, when is my birthday?" She said, "What?" I said, "My birthday, what's the date?" A pause, then she said, "March 14th. I said, "That was 11 days ago, did you call me?" She was quiet. I said, "The year before, did you call me?" She said it had been a complicated year. I said, "The year before that?" Nothing. I said, "Mom, I am not blowing anything up. I am telling you that I cannot keep funding a family that does not acknowledge that I exist. I love you. I love Marcus. I love Dad. But I am not an ATM with feelings. And I am not going to keep pretending that everything is fine when every year on the one day that is mine, I wake up to silence." My mother started crying. Real crying. Not the kind that is meant to make you feel guilty. The kind that sounds like someone who has just heard something they already knew was true, but had never let themselves hear out loud. She said, "I didn't realize." I said, "I know you didn't, but now you do." I told her I loved her. I told her I needed some time. I told her that when I was ready to talk more, I would reach out. And then I ended the call. Gently, firmly, and completely. Now I want to tell you about the 10 days that followed, because this is where the story gets wider and where the truth turns out to be even bigger than I thought. My Aunt Vera called me on Sunday. Vera is my mother's older sister. She is 71 years old and has always struck me as someone who watches more than she speaks. She grew up in the same family my mother grew up in, and she has seen patterns the rest of us were still discovering. She asked if she could come over. I said yes. Vera arrived with 2 cups of coffee from the place down my street that she had somehow known about even though she lived 40 minutes away. She sat down across from me at my kitchen table and she said, "I want to tell you some things about this family." What Vera told me over the next 2 hours rearranged the story I thought I was living in. She told me that my grandmother, the one who had owned the house, had left specific verbal instructions before she died that she wanted the property shared between all grandchildren equitably. She had not formalized this in the will because she trusted the family to honor her wishes. The will itself left the estate to be divided among her adult children, who were then supposed to distribute according to her wishes. My mother and my 2 aunts had decided, without Vera's full agreement, that Marcus needed the property most. Vera had raised objections. She had been outvoted. The email I had found was part of that process. Vera said she had assumed someone would tell me. She said that when months passed and no one did, she had brought it up with my mother and been told that it would be handled and not to interfere. It was never handled. I was simply never told. Vera also told me something I had not known about the financial transfers over the years. She said she had watched my family ask me for money multiple times, and she had always felt uncomfortable about it, but had told herself it was between parents and adult children and not her place to speak. She said she had not known the scope of it. When I told her the number, she closed her eyes for a moment and then said, "I'm sorry, Luna. I should have said something a long time ago." I told her she didn't owe me an apology, but I appreciated that she gave one. Vera also told me that Marcus had received financial help from my parents far beyond what I had known. Not just the transfers I was aware of. My parents had paid Marcus's car off 2 years ago. They had contributed a significant amount to his home down payment. They had covered the cost of a business certification program he had enrolled in and then dropped out of. Combined with the things I already knew, Marcus had received well over $100,000 in family support over the same period, where I had been told the family didn't have much to give. and where I had been the one contributing rather than receiving. I had never received $1 from my parents, not as a gift, not as a loan, not as a contribution toward anything. I want to say that again so it lands properly. I had given my family over $70,000. My family had given Marcus over $100,000. My family had never given me anything. And they had told me, on the occasion of the one time I expressed hurt about being forgotten on my birthday, that I should take it as a compliment that they trusted me to manage on my own. I went very still when Vera finished talking. I did not cry. I had moved past the part of this process where the information made me cry. I was in a different place now, the place where things become clear. I thanked Vera. I asked her if she would be willing to put in writing what she had told me about my grandmother's wishes and the property meeting she had been part of. She said yes without hesitating. She said she had been waiting a long time for someone to ask. I added her statement to my truth folder. The estate attorney consultation happened on Wednesday of the following week. I brought the email thread, Vera's written statement, and a summary of the information I had gathered. The attorney was careful in the way that good attorneys are careful. She did not make promises, but she said the situation was worth investigating further. She said that if my grandmother's verbal instructions could be corroborated, and if the transfer had not followed proper process, there were potentially legitimate grounds to challenge the distribution. She also said something that I found very grounding. She said that even if the property case proved difficult to pursue, what I had documented about the broader pattern of financial contributions was something I should have for my own clarity going forward. She said that people who are financially generous inside families often suffer from an invisibility that goes unchallenged until they choose to make it visible. I chose to make it visible. I did not file anything that week. I was not in a rush. What I had was time, documentation, and clarity. The people who had spent 11 years acting like I had no needs or limits now had no idea what I was thinking or what I had gathered. That asymmetry was the most powerful thing I had ever held. Marcus called on the second Wednesday. He had gotten over the initial anger and moved into what I can only describe as negotiation mode. He said he understood I was upset. He said he knew the family had not always been great about making me feel seen. He said he appreciated everything I had done for the family over the years and that he had always known he owed me money and had been meaning to address that. I said, "How much do you think you owe me, Marcus?" He said he wasn't sure exactly, but that he would figure it out. I said, "I have the exact number, whenever you're ready." He said, "Luna, I don't want this to become adversarial." I said, "I don't either. I'm just telling you that I've been keeping careful records and that the amount is not small." He asked me to give him some time to think. I said, of course. I told him I was not going anywhere. And then I said, "Marcus, did you end up finding the yacht deposit somewhere else?" He said they had had to scale the celebration back significantly. They were doing a dinner at a restaurant instead. I said, "I hope it's a wonderful dinner. Happy birthday." And I meant it. I genuinely did. Marcus is my brother and I love him even in his worst habits, but love is not a blank check. Love does not mean being perpetually available to fund someone else's excess while your own birthday passes in silence. I think I had confused those two things for a very long time. Over the following month, several things happened in a sequence that I could not have planned better if I had tried. My parents came to visit. My mother had asked if she could come, and I had said yes. They arrived on a Saturday, and we sat in my living room, and my mother did most of the talking. She talked about how she had been thinking about what I said. She talked about how she realized she had been taking me for granted. She said she was sorry for forgetting my birthdays. She said she loved me, and she wanted things to be better between us. My father said almost nothing, but at one point he put his hand on my arm and said, "You deserved better from us, Luna." That was it. 5 words. But it was the first time my father had said anything like that to me in my adult life, and I received it quietly and with more emotion than I showed. I did not unleash everything I had gathered in that conversation. I did not present the documents. I did not bring up the property. I listened. I acknowledged what they said. I told them I appreciated them coming. I told them that I needed the future to look different from the past, and that I was willing to work toward that, but that I could no longer fund things I was not also valued within. My mother agreed. My father nodded. The conversation ended without drama, and for the first time in years, something between us felt honest rather than performed. The property matter did develop further. Through the estate attorney, I formally requested documentation of the process by which my grandmother's property had been transferred to Marcus. That request created a significant response on the family side. My uncle called 3 more times. One of my aunts sent a very long email saying I was tearing the family apart and that I should think about what my grandmother would have wanted. I wrote back to that email. I said that I had thought I'd a lot about what my grandmother would have wanted, including the part where she wanted the property distributed equitably among all grandchildren, which was documented in Vera's statement. I said I was not tearing the family apart. I was asking a legal and reasonable question about a family asset that had been distributed without my knowledge or consent. The aunt did not respond. 2 weeks later, through a letter from my uncle's attorney, I received a settlement proposal. No lawsuit had been filed. No court date had been set. Simply the inquiry, the documentation I had gathered, and Vera's statement had been enough to prompt a proposal. The proposal offered me a cash settlement representing an agreed portion of the property value in exchange for releasing any claim to the property itself. I took the offer to my attorney. She said it was reasonable given the circumstances and the risks of formal litigation. She said she could negotiate the number up somewhat. She negotiated it up 20%. I signed the settlement. The number I received is private, but I will tell you that it was substantial, and that it covered, with some to spare, the amount I had calculated as the outstanding loans my family had never repaid. I want to be clear about something. I did not go into any of this for the money. I am not a vindictive person. I do not enjoy conflict. I did not want to spend months gathering documents and consulting attorneys and having difficult conversations with the people I grew up with. What I wanted, for most of my adult life, was to be seen by my family, to have my birthday acknowledged, to receive a fraction of the warmth and effort that flowed toward Marcus without hesitation, to be loved in proportion to how much I loved. When that became impossible to sustain hoping for, I made different choices. I stopped funding what did not fund me back. I stopped accepting the idea that my stability was a justification for my erasure. I stopped pretending that the pattern was accidental or that the next year would be different. And then I held very still, and I let the truth do what truth does when you finally let it move freely. The settlement was finalized on a Thursday in May. The following Saturday was my niece's birthday, Marcus's daughter from his marriage. I sent her a card and a gift in the mail, a real card with handwriting in it, a good gift that I knew she would love, because none of this is about the children, and none of it is about cutting off love permanently. It is about deciding who you will be to people who have shown you exactly who they are to you. I went back to my own life. I had dinner with Diane on the evening after the settlement was finalized. We did not make toasts or celebrate dramatically. We had good food and we talked about normal things, and she held my hand across the table for a moment and said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it, I said, like I finally stopped apologizing for being solid. She nodded. She understood exactly what I meant. I want to tell you where things stand now, because the story does not end with a perfect family reunion, and it does not end with permanent estrangement either. It ends in a new ordinary that I am still learning to inhabit. My mother calls me every 2 weeks. She called on my birthday this year. She was the first call I received that morning. She sang part of the birthday song and then got embarrassed partway through and laughed at herself. It was imperfect and genuine. It was the most I had received from her on that day in 11 years. I cried a little after I got off the phone, in the good way. My father and I text more than we talk. He sends me things he thinks I would find interesting, articles about topics he knows I care about. It is modest, but it is consistent. And consistency from my father is newer and more meaningful than any big gesture would be. Marcus and I are in a slower process. He has paid back some of what he owed me, not all of it. We have had several honest conversations that were uncomfortable and necessary. He has said things I think he means. I am watching what he does, not just what he says. We are not where we were before, but I am not sure where we were before was ever as solid as I thought it was. We are building something different. Whether it holds will depend on choices he makes going forward that I cannot control. Aunt Vera came to have coffee with me last month. She brought pastries and stayed for 3 hours. She told me stories about my grandmother I had never heard. She said my grandmother used to say that the best thing a woman could do was know her own worth before someone else tried to define it for her. I wrote that down when Vera left. I put it on a card on my kitchen windowsill where I can see it when I make coffee in the morning. I think about the dollar I sent Marcus a lot. Not with pride exactly, not with regret either, more with a kind of recognition. It was such a small th. Ing, $1 in an app, 5 words in a note. But it was also the moment I stopped speaking the language that had been written for me and started speaking in one I chose for myself. For 11 years, I had spoken the language of sacrifice and silence and unconditional giving. That language had a grammar that went like this: give without being asked, ask for nothing in return, accept the silence on your birthday as a compliment, accept being overlooked as the price of being seen as capable, write the check for the yacht even if no one remembers the day you were born. I do not speak that language anymore. I speak the language of a woman who knows what she has given, who keeps her own records, who loves her family and also has limits, who can send $1 and mean every cent of it, and who can sit in a quiet apartment on a Saturday morning in March, drinking good coffee, knowing that the day belongs to her and she belongs to herself. That, I think, is the most expensive thing I ever bought, and also the most valuable. If this story made you feel something, I want to know what it was. Leave a comment telling me the moment in this story where you would have done something different. Tell me the moment you would have broken before Luna did. Tell me whether you think the dollar was the right move or if she should have said nothing at all. And if you know someone who gives and never asks for anything back, share this with them. Not because it changes anything overnight, but because sometimes hearing a story is the thing that finally lets you name what has been true for a long time. Thank you for watching the whole way through.